the soldier who wouldn't board the plane. The first time Thor refused a command, Staff Sergeant Daniel Brooks thought it was a mistake. Military dogs don't hesitate. They don't question orders, especially not Thor. It was just after sunrise at Hope Army Airfield in Fayetteville, North Carolina. The air carried that heavy southern humidity, thick even in the early morning. The runway shimmered in pale orange light, and a gray C-17 transport plane idled, with a low mechanical hum that vibrated. Through the concrete, Daniel adjusted the strap on his duffel bag and glanced down at his partner load up Thor. The Belgian Malinois stood still, not distracted, not anxious, just still. And in 12 years of service, Thor had never done that before. Daniel met Thor 7 years earlier at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. Thor had been 2 years old, lean, sharp-eyed, restless in the way only working dogs are. Daniel was fresh out of K-9 handler school, trying to prove he belonged. Thor didn't warm up to him immediately. Military dogs rarely do. Trust wasn't automatic. It was built in early morning training drills under the Texas sun, in long scent detection exercises, where Thor would freeze, nose trembling, tail rigid as wire, in obstacle courses where Daniel learned to read the smallest shift in posture, the twitch of an ear, the subtle lean forward before a sprint. Thor wasn't just obedient, he was precise. Afghanistan was where the bond sealed to deployments, endless patrols through villages where every pile of debris could hide something deadly. Daniel learned to watch Thor more than the road. The dog's body language often told him what human eyes couldn't see. Once Thor stopped mid-stride on a dirt path outside Kandahar. Daniel almost urged him forward. Almost. Thor sat instead, silent, alert, rigid. Engineers later uncovered an IED buried shallow beneath loose soil. Daniel never forgot that moment. Thor had saved at least 6 lives that day. After that, it wasn't just handler and dog, it was partnership. The deployment had ended clean, no injuries, no incidents, just another rotation complete. They were scheduled to fly home to Fort Liberty for demobilization. Thor's retirement paperwork was already filed at nearly 9 years old. He had earned it. Daniel had plans: a small house outside Fayetteville, a fenced yard, quiet mornings. Thor would sleep on a real bed for once. The crew chief signaled time to board. Handlers began guiding their dogs up the rear ramp of the aircraft. One by one, the dogs climbed without resistance. Load up, Daniel said again, calm but firm. Thor stepped forward, then stopped, his ears pinned slightly. Not in fear, in focus. Daniel felt a flicker of irritation. Thor, nothing. A few soldiers glanced over. One smirked lightly. He getting sentimental on you, Sarge? Daniel ignored it. He crouched, hand resting against Thor's neck. The dog's muscles were tense, his nose lifted into the air, nostrils flaring. He wasn't refusing, he was assessing. Easy boy, Daniel murmured. Thor took 2 steps toward the ramp, then planted himself hard. The leash went taut. That's when Daniel's irritation shifted into something colder. Thor's tail wasn't tucked. He wasn't stressed. He was locked onto something. The aircraft, specifically the lower fuselage near the left landing gear. Daniel followed his gaze. The C-17's engines were running. Ground crew moved routinely beneath the wings. Nothing looked wrong, but Thor gave a low, almost inaudible whine. Not fear, warning. Daniel stood. Hold boarding, he called toward the crew chief. The man frowned. We're on schedule. Sergeant, I need a maintenance check. On what? Daniel hesitated. He had no concrete reason, just a dog who had never been wrong before. My K-9 is alerting. The crew chief looked annoyed. This isn't a detection mission. Daniel didn't raise his voice. Sir, with respect, Thor has over 2,000 operational hours and 0 false alerts. If he's signaling I'm not boarding. There was tension in the air now, thicker than the humidity. After a long pause, the crew chief signaled to ground maintenance. 2 mechanics rolled equipment toward the aircraft. Thor remained motionless, eyes fixed. Minutes stretched. Daniel felt every second pressing against his ribs. Then one of the mechanics froze. He crouched near the landing gear housing. Another mechanic joined him. There was hurried movement. A toolkit opened. The crew chief's radio crackled. Daniel couldn't hear the words, but he saw the expression change. The aircraft engines powered down. The hum faded. The mechanic finally stood and walked toward the crew chief, shaking his head. A hydraulic line partially ruptured, slow leak difficult to detect under standard pre-flight checks. It hadn't triggered system alarms yet, but under full pressure at altitude, landing gear. Failure was a real possibility. The crew chief approached Daniel slowly. You might have just saved this entire flight. Daniel looked down at Thor. The dog's posture softened. Instantly, as if a switch had flipped, his tail gave one calm wag. Alert complete. The flight was grounded for 12 hours. The soldiers were rerouted to another aircraft. Word spread quickly. Some called it coincidence. Others didn't. Daniel didn't care about praise. He cared about patterns. Thor had reacted to something, perhaps the faint scent of hydraulic fluid carried by shifting air currents. Something human senses had missed, but what stayed with Daniel wasn't the mechanical failure. It was the look in Thor's eyes, absolute certainty, as if he had known that evening sitting on the tarmac beside the replacement aircraft. Daniel removed Thor's harness and let him rest against his leg. You did it again, he whispered. Thor leaned into him, warm and solid. 7 years, 2 deployments, dozens of missions, and now this. Back home, the story quietly circulated within the unit. There was no media attention, no headlines, just an internal commendation added to Thor's file. But something shifted inside Daniel. Months passed. Thor adjusted slowly to civilian life. He startled at fewer sounds, slept longer, stopped scanning every parking lot for threats. One evening, Daniel sat on his porch watching Thor chase fireflies in the yard. No vest, no leash, no aircraft waiting, just grass beneath his paws. Daniel thought back to that morning on the runway, to the moment when he could have forced compliance, when pride or pressure might have pushed him to ignore the hesitation. If he had pulled harder on that leash. He exhaled slowly. Trust works both ways. People often think handlers control military dogs, but the truth is quieter sometimes. The dog leads. Thor lived 3 more peaceful years. When his health finally declined, it was gentle age, not trauma. On his last night, Thor rested his head on Daniel's knee, just like he had on the tarmac months earlier. No alarms, no warnings, just calm. Daniel stayed with him until the end. Years later, Daniel still drives past the airfield. Sometimes he still remembers the sound of that engine hum fading into silence. He remembers the tension, the decision, the choice to listen, and every time someone asks him what made Thor special, he doesn't talk about medals or deployments. He talks about that morning, about the day a military dog refused to board a plane and saved everyone on it.